This is Counsel Cast, and I'm your host, Karin Conroy, your Marketing Co-Counsel. In every episode, I discuss marketing topics with experts who answer your questions and help your law firm achieve next-level results. Here's today's guest.
Hi, I'm MV Braverman, founder of Inbox Welcome, and my agency's goal is to take your emails from sent to seen. So I help with the technical side of email, especially, which a lot of people struggle with, the automations, all of the technical infrastructure stuff. And I do also think about the human side. I think that's kind of my specialty. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here. I also tell people I like to untangle tech spaghetti, which makes them wildly happy.
I love that. I love the visual of that. And thank you so much, Emily, for being here. This is going to be exciting because I also love the combination of the tech side of things, but also making sure that I was going to say have a human overlay, but I feel like the tech is more the overlay and the human part should be the first kind of more foundational thought in terms of all of this marketing stuff you're doing, not just your email marketing, but everything. And then if you want to or need to add a tech overlay to expedite things, make things go faster and make things happen, especially when it comes to email, you need some tech there to make that happen. Then yes, of course, add that in, but don't forget that human side of things. And that's where things really go wrong. So the title for today's show is What is the Future of Email Marketing for Law Firms? So we're going to talk a little bit about the tech side, the things that are kind of coming, things that have been changing when it comes to email, things that you may not be aware of that could be hurting your email. So let's first start with what should we start with? Let's start with some of the problems that people may not even be aware of when it comes to what's going on with email marketing.
Well, I think many of us are at least peripherally aware that our inboxes are overflowing and there's a ton of spam out there. Now, that's actually gotten better over the years, but believe it or not, behind the scenes, it's gotten a lot worse, especially since the advent of ChatGPT. Industry reports are just basically spams. Yeah. Scams are just skyrocketing at almost an exponential pace. And so, Google, Yahoo, mailbox providers have had to do a lot behind the scenes, especially Google, because a lot of spam, about 93% of spam originates with Gmail. Unfortunately, the ease is also taken advantage of. It's, again, in the realm of this is why we can't have nice things. But Google and Yahoo, not last October anymore, October 2023, Google and Yahoo made a big announcement that was kind of a little overlooked for the rest of 2023 while I was like, seems important, but we found out in 2024. So they've basically said, and in some ways it's actually become more human, I would say. So to summarize their new requirements is authenticate your email, which is basically put some technical signatures to say you are who you say you are, which of course everyone, especially lawyers, financial, really want to be able to prove that. Send emails that people want.
Yes.
And make it easy for them to unsubscribe. Unfortunately, there's a lot of unscrupulous people who are, complying with the very bare letter of the law. But if your unsubscribe link is, in 6-point type and like light gray on white, I would say you're not really compliant.
You're making it. Yeah, we all know those emails where you just keep getting this relentless spam and you keep trying to figure out how to unsubscribe, and it shouldn't be that hard. It should be obvious and clear, and it should be one click. And so as a law firm, let's just start by saying, let's make it very clear and very obvious, and let's not try to skirt around these kind of things that make you look so smarmy. So first of all, you have to have an unsubscribe link. It has to be clear. It has to be one click. And these are CAN spam laws. And what is at risk? I've talked a lot about these problems that you are running up against by putting these things at risk. So let's talk just for a minute about what happens if you decide to be sort of questionable in your tactics. What happens to your emails in general, not just your email newsletter or whatever you're sending out through your email campaigns, but all of your emails.
Well, I think we can safely say bad things happen to your emails.
Bad.
So, I mean, first, just because you make it difficult to unsubscribe does not mean you make it difficult for people to hit report spam.
Right.
And part of the good thing, the kind of the carrot behind the make it easy to unsubscribe, is if you comply with these certain technical requirements, which every email marketing platform now does, then Google nudges people away from report spam. Because for a long time, people just use it as an unsubscribe button anyway.
Yeah.
But let me just say that unsubscribe is a neutral signal. I know if you're a solo person with a small list, it kind of stings when you look at it.
Right.
But
why didn't you like my email?
Yeah, why didn't you like my email? I like to tell a little story, like maybe they're, taking that long-awaited trip around the world and they're just unsubscribing from everything. Wish them well. Like whatever it is.
I love that visual.
It's great.
Yeah.
More room. I'm paying less for subscribers because that's another consideration, of course.
Yeah. Sure.
But yeah, so that's kind of a neutral signal. I mean, if you have a large percentage of unsubscribes, that's not great. But let me tell you, one spam complaint is worth more than 10 or more unsubscribes. So,
interesting.
You do not want...
Okay, so that's good to know. Getting an unsubscribe is way, way better than having someone report you as spam. And
Absolutely.
We all know when you're in your inbox, it's not too far from clicking on the little unsubscribe thing versus report spam. So what happens when there is a signal that someone has reported you for spam?
If it's a one-time thing, or if it's just a small percentage, it's okay. It happens to everybody and we don't worry about it. But they have, Google and Yahoo, and let me just say Microsoft and Apple are not far behind. Microsoft has made it very clear that they will be adopting a similar standard.
Okay.
And Google and Yahoo will be tightening further. So the standards that Google has kind of set out the most clearly is ideally you want to be under 0.1% of spam reports. So one person in 1,000 on your list can report it as spam, and it's okay. Okay. If you're at 0.3 or below, you're kind of in the getting edgy there territory.
Kind of a danger zone.
Yeah. If you are consistently above 0.3%, so that's 3 out of 1,000. Yeah. They will not work with you to mitigate. They will not help you get out of that. And to be clear, if you have a spike, if one campaign goes wrong, it's okay. They will take it into consideration. But if you are consistently sending questionable emails, whether that's cold outreach or whatever else from your domain, you are affecting the reputation of your entire domain. Yeah. So that means, if you're trying to communicate with a new client one-on-one, your marketing, that also affects whether they receive it.
Whether they receive your emails. And what I've seen
all of your channels are affected. Yeah.
Yes. And what I've seen happen is they get your domain gets blacklisted. And where this really impacts is government websites, emails, things. So, excuse me, as a lawyer, you're sending a judge an email and it won't go through. And and you're fighting with your inbox and your emails and you're trying to get it through and you're telling the judge, I sent this thing. How embarrassing is that? How embarrassing is it that your domain is blacklisted and you can't get the important critical emails through to a judge or a government organization because you've been spamming people? I mean, let's just kind of look at this big picture and how embarrassing and problematic that could be. So the bottom line is just follow the rules. Don't do all that stuff. And one of the rules in terms of the can spam is that people have to have opted into your list. I cannot tell you the number of times in this day where people will...
That's not quite true.
It's not true?
That's not quite true by can spam.
Okay, tell me what
is some kind of a transactional relationship. So you could technically add a client to your list.
Okay.
Or even someone who had some kind of an interaction with you. So if I buy something on, a website, they can technically add me to their list.
Yeah.
Because I'm not a lawyer. So hoping that someone is a lawyer. Can spam is more opt out. You have to make it easy for them to opt out and comply within 10 days, which I assure you, Google and Yahoo are not going to wait around for you for 10 days.
Right.
But you technically can, but just because you can doesn't mean you should. And
Okay.
I believe, again, not a lawyer, some state laws like California and Arizona go beyond that. And of course, international laws go way beyond
Okay,
that.
so in the case, this is what I see quite often. In the case that a lawyer is starting their own firm, they're leaving a firm, and they're taking a client list from that previous firm. This client list has not contacted them under the name of the new firm. They contacted them under the name of the old firm, which is a different business, a different set, legal arrangement. My understanding is that they technically really don't have the right to send an email to those clients that really were under the previous firm. Is that right? Or do you
I
think
don't know if I would
that's
agree with that because, I've rebranded, people rebrand. I would say that's questionable, maybe legally from whatever agreements they have.
well,
as
yeah, it's a combination
employees,
of
but that
ethics.
I don't
Yeah,
know. Right. Yeah. The other thing is that they have to make it like really clear that this is where you know me from. This is who I am.
right. Yeah.
So technically, again, they could, but again, the fear is not necessarily that legal, at least for me. It's more, are they going to hit that spam button?
Right. Okay. All right. So if you're leaving and going to a new firm or starting your new firm, totally different business, your contacts from the old business, you're saying that you think it's relatively safe to send emails to a list that you obtained under a different firm.
I would definitely maybe send it as a 1 or 2 time thing and say, I'd love to continue our relationship. Please sign up.
Okay.
And then
yeah,
you will
that makes
have
more
that
sense.
affirmative consent.
Yeah,
You
that
won't
makes
keep
sense.
emailing them because if they
Yeah.
abandon that mailbox, I'm again looking at this more from the technical side.
Sure. Yeah.
But like if they abandoned that mailbox and they moved on, you
Yeah.
don't have that. You have that clean list of people who
Yeah.
actually said yes.
Yeah.
That is my goal, is a list of people who have affirmatively consented. I like to say that I practice enthusiastic email consent. So you have to really say, I really want to be on your list. I really want to hear from you.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So what about buying lists? I see this all the time. Let's spend a minute. If you're listening, Evie is making like a bad shaking head.
Please, 100,000 ways. Please don't.
Okay, so why not?
Please don't. Yeah. Again, they have not consented. That is a super fast way to like, people who buy lists, I will just say straight out, they're spammers.
Yeah.
Even if they have the best intentions, they're spammers.
Yeah.
People are not aware of what they're signing up for, and they didn't sign up. You don't know where the email came from. Was it scraped from a website? Whatever. Like, I'm getting emails to an email address that's for LinkedIn only. So I know they scraped it from LinkedIn. I did not consent to that.
Yeah.
So again, the straight path to spam, bad reputation. Like, is that really how you want to present yourself?
Yes.
Whether it's legal or not, is that really how you want to present yourself?
Right. Exactly. Okay. So Google and Yahoo, you started to talk about the new requirements because there's such an influx of spam, even though I feel like from my inbox, it feels pretty steady. So I think if those numbers are up,
really good. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. That's really a positive reflection on how good they are at controlling it. But what's super important are these technical requirements that you mentioned, these DMARC, the DKIM, the SPF. So we have to make sure. Do you want to talk for a minute about it? I feel like you probably have a better kind of in a nutshell way of presenting why this matters and how it's super important.
Again, it's prove you are who you say you are, because a lot of like the low level spam and scam emails don't bother with that. They just try to take advantage of the.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, when email was created, it was very trust-based relationship.
Yeah.
And so we've had to deal with that ever since. It wasn't built to be secure. So, yes, we definitely have the acronym SOUP. So SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. And I like the analogy I give is, you're going to a nightclub. I want to get into this cool new nightclub. There's a guard at the door. They will not let you in. So in order to get in, you have to be on the list, because they just open. They're not letting everybody in. So are you on the list? That's SPF.
Okay.
You're basically saying, I send emails from, say, Salesforce and Google Workspace. Anybody who's sending from HubSpot or whatever, they're not me.
Yeah. Okay.
So they have to check off. Then you have to show your ID, and they have to scan it and verify it. So that's DKIM. It's kind of your digital encrypted signature in a way.
Okay.
And then you have DMARC, and which is kind of a set of instructions to the bouncer. If you don't pass those first two, what should be done? Do we just kick you right out? Do we put you out by the the garbage bins? Are you hanging out in the coat check? Yeah. Or can you just keep strolling in anyway?
Yeah.
So that's kind of a very high level view of it.
And so KIM tells them where to put those emails? So
that's DMARC.
Oh,
DKIM is a digital signature, basically. It's the better description is if you send a package, it's a tape seal.
Okay, got it. So DMARC is the one that tells them what to do with the email.
Yes, but the really important thing is you have to have SPF and DKIM. It sits on top of those. If you have those misconfigured, that's going to affect the rest. So one thing I see a lot is, email marketing platforms like MailChimp, Salesforce, they tell you what to do for their channel.
Yeah.
But they don't say, hey, you need to consider your one-on-one emails. You need to consider your website contact form, all the other email channels that send.
Yeah.
And so only that part works perfectly. And you're like, I'm golden.
Yeah.
You're not.
Right. So typically, I don't want to get super technical about this because typically when it comes to these settings, we will have, if we are helping a client with their email and their email settings and we have access to that, we will take care of that. And we will double check that all of those settings are in place. Oftentimes, that is something that their IT provider or whoever has set up your email accounts and your email service provider, they should know this stuff and you should just basically double check. Are these all in place? Do you have other recommendations for that?
Ideally, yes. I don't know. I have been in IT support for a long time. So I don't know if they always have the full view.
Okay.
And
so how can people, what do you recommend for people to be able to check these settings to make sure it's correct and in there the way it needs to be?
I mean, the other thing is, of course, if you have a large enough corporation, you have rogue people setting stuff up all the time. But the really important thing is if you have DMARC, the R in DMARC stands for reporting. I see a lot of people do not take advantage of it. It's really important. Set up reporting, read your report. You're going to see everything everything people are trying to send out, you're going to see it and catch it.
Okay.
So that's my biggest recommendation, especially if you're in enforcement. So you're saying, send them to co-check or kick them out.
Yeah.
It's absolutely critical because otherwise you're not going to know if things are going wrong.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. All right. So that's the technical side of things. And it's really important because what's happening here, if you don't have all of these security settings done correctly, is your emails just will not get delivered. And we're not just talking about your email newsletters and your email campaigns. This is affecting all of your emails. So this is super important. You need to double check, make sure it's all the way it needs to be. But let's flip over to the human side of things now. And as we're talking about making sure that these technical settings are the way they need to be to get your emails into the inbox, how do you then make sure that people actually care about reading your emails? And where do you start in terms of, let's just talk about first the subject line to get people to care and open the email?
I would say if I knew the answer to that, I would be a whole lot happier.
Yeah, okay.
But in some ways, it needs to be straightforward yet intriguing, no pressure, and especially short. Because the majority of emails these days are being read on mobile. If you are trying to write a novel in your subject line, it's going to get cut off. Sometimes it's going to get cut off really funny in ways you didn't expect. But I think in some ways there's almost too much pressure on the subject line. And the other thing to think about is your display name.
Okay.
That's really important because people consider both who is sending this and what the subject line is.
Okay.
So if, I get emails that are from Anne. What? Because I didn't set it up correctly. So when I send emails, I just say MV and then at inbox welcome. So they know exactly who I am and where I'm from if it's a business email.
Okay. So you recommend just using a name, not having some elaborate name for your newsletter or whatever, using like a human name.
Ideally, yes, especially if you're representing yourself kind of as the face of the business. It gets harder. If it's a giant corporation and they're sending it from a person and just like, really, they've probably long since moved on, or this is a fake persona.
Yeah.
But if you're the face of your business, if it's a small, a small company or just you, then yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right. So I can't tell you the number of times when I've talked to firms about setting up a newsletter and their image of what this looks like is from like 1984. And it's this detailed newsletter that talks about, first of all, just a million things. And it talks about things happening in the news, things happening in, their neighborhood, things, and it's so disjointed and so complex. And my first thought is, who is going to sit and read all of this, and why would they care? So let's talk about this image that I think, this historical idea of like what a newsletter looks like, which is like the front page of a newspaper, like these detailed, versus what you think actually works.
Well, what I think actually works is, we have pretty short attention spans. So unless you're like a 1440 or some other newsletter that's like a news aggregator or something, keep it short, ideally, just one topic. I do have clients who send like one monthly newsletter that's a little bit like that, and it works for them, or at least it works well enough for them that they don't want to change. But I'm on the side of shorter and sweeter and give people a chance to decide. Maybe some of them do want to hear about the neighborhood news.
Yeah.
And then let them opt into that channel. So separate it out and let them decide. Sure. Tease in each newsletter saying like, here's what other things we're talking about. Let them click.
Interesting.
Just give them a chance to think about how they want to hear from you. What do they want to hear from you? I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but like, believe me, if I could like just get my hands on a lawyer and just even ask one question, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
And I mean, again, don't know what kind of lawyers they are, but of course the first question is like, how much is this going to cost, and how exactly does this billing thing work? So
right.
Please answer us questions.
Well, and as if you've been a lawyer for more than a few weeks, you know what the common questions are. So whatever your practice is, and whatever people are coming to you for, what commonly the first couple questions are going to be. And so start with that and keep it really clean and simple. And then I love this idea of give options for people who might want more. So if there are people who want a more involved, detailed newsletter, put that option in there and then see if people opt in. And if you get all of a sudden a bunch of responses where people are saying, tell us more about this and this and this, the neighborhood and whatever, then you've proven that concept instead of just guessing.
Yeah, I mean, just send us separate emails. But the other thing is, if you answer these questions up front with an automation, you don't have to repeat yourself nearly as much.
Yeah.
You're not wasting your time. You're not wasting their time. I love going on podcasts, but there's a lot of times where I end up saying close to the same thing.
Yeah.
But even then, after that, when people reach out to me, having heard me on the podcast, they already heard me say these things. They know them. At least they refer to them and say, you said something about what's the difference between deliver and deliverability. And so I can quickly summarize it. Right. But they at least have a much better idea of what they need. So they're more pre-qualified.
Yeah. Right.
And they're more educated. And they're more invested in you or me.
Yeah.
Or
they've already listened to the things you have to say and decided that that's what they need. Okay. So you talk about this idea of set it and forget it and why that could be a problem. So tell us more about that. And because I think when it comes to especially things like an email newsletter or an email campaign, that's what people, and a lot of my clients are kind of in their mind, they're thinking, oh, we set this up once and then we're good.
Well, I mean, campaigns by their nature are not set it and forget it, but it's more the automations. And I'm a big fan of automations. I'm a big fan of, evergreen newsletters, onboarding sequences, all kinds of things. But the thing about that is It's just like, when you design your website, it was, you set it up years ago, so you forgot about it. But it's the first impression that people get.
Right.
Is it still the impression you want to give?
Right.
So the same thing with automations. Is this still the impression you want to give? Are these still the questions you want to be answering?
Yeah.
And is it still working? So strong recommendation is maybe that's a takeaway to do. If you have some kind of an opt-in method, go and sign up for it with a fresh email address and see how that actually works.
Right.
Or ask a friend or someone to sign up. Like, what do they perceive? And is that what you think they are perceiving?
Yeah, or even just open it up if you have access to those accounts and read through it. If you did this 2 or 3 years ago, is this what you still want to be saying? And is it still current? I mean, maybe you're talking about certain laws that have changed. Maybe you're talking, maybe there's certain details and things that you need to just go in and update. And by not updating them, it's really kind of a negative first impression. Right. And the same with your website. I say this all the time. There's a handful of things, because I'm looking at law firm websites all day, every day. And so I can real quickly look at a website and tell you the kind of agency that you used to design it, what's happening behind the scenes. I can also tell real quickly the last time you touched it. So if your copyright is like, 2019, you haven't changed anything, you haven't had a blog post update in 2 or 3 years, it just looks old and dusty to me. And that's going to be your first impression for your clients. And that's so bad. And there's a lot of things that you can do if you're too busy to have blog posts and things like that. There's a lot of things you can do to take those impressions away. But the first step is to check in and make sure it's all still up to date and there's nothing that needs to be refreshed, which it's likely there is.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So when it comes to emails and campaigns and newsletters and, all the different versions of email marketing, what do you think is typical for an agency, for a firm, like let's just say a typical small business, in terms of how many different kinds of campaigns and email systems should they have in place? So, for example, a newsletter, a welcome sequence, a response to something on their blog, or, what do you see that's typical in terms of how many different types of campaigns that a typical business or firm might need?
I think first we need to get on the same page about the terminology. So your email marketing platform is going to let you send. So we kind of separate out. Well, there's several separations. You have marketing emails versus transactional emails.
Okay.
And the marketing emails, you must be able to opt out of. Transactional, like receipts and shipping confirmations, things like that. You're not technically required to have an opt-out there. But then there's there's campaigns, which are one-time sends that you can schedule for a specific date or send immediately. And there's automations, which are triggered by some kind of action. So someone signs up, someone makes a purchase. It could even be like an abandoned cart or something like that. So I'm sure you've gotten those. You went to a website, put something in your cart, and then a few hours or days later, they're like, hey, did you forget anything?
Right.
Yeah, so those are automations, and those are, again, triggered by something.
Right. You don't see those like abandoned cart type things in terms of law firms as often.
Usually, I am actually seeing those more in like courses, which I thought was interesting.
Right. Oh. Yeah. For most of the firms that we work with, we're talking about email newsletters, possibly an ebook type lead magnet, and then campaigns that relate to their marketing funnel. So throughout that customer journey for a typical law firm, I'd say those are the 3 main areas that we are seeing campaigns and automations built for various purposes with the email platform. Do you think that's kind of representative of what you're seeing with your clients as well?
Yeah, definitely. Your welcome sequence absolutely is like the most profitable sequence for e-commerce is abandoned cart. The most profitable sequence for a general business is going to be your welcome sequence, because they remember you. They're ready to hear something about you. Like, give them what they want without overwhelming.
Yeah.
And the other thing, we talked about lead magnets. I think one big mistake that people make is they sort of give you the lead magnet and then that's it. Then they launch you into their regular newsletter, which I think is a huge mistake.
Oh, really?
Because then it just sits there, as we say, collecting digital dust. Chances are. But so I have a how to set up DMARC for yourself guide. So I have a sequence of 5 emails to follow up to walk them through big parts of it and say, hey, did you have a chance to look at this part? Here's a little more about it.
Yeah.
And just make the most of this thing that you should be proud of and that you spend time creating, ideally.
Yeah.
Because chances are they grabbed it, they glanced at it, they forgot about it.
Right.
But they will probably, something interested them about it.
Yeah.
So they would probably benefit from actually coming back to it, maybe with a fresh look or even just more time.
Right. So typically you'll have some kind of a lead magnet, like an ebook or a download or whatever. And then you have a sequence that follows that to kind of remind them over time. And then what happens after that, once they get through the end of the sequence? Because typically we will oftentimes then have them go into the newsletter just as, top of mind reminders, that kind of thing. Is that what you typically do also?
Yeah, that's totally normal.
Okay. All right. I thought earlier you were saying not to do that, but you were saying not to just,
I'm just saying
jump right
don't
into
just,
that.
Yeah. Because I have, it's pretty popular on Facebook. You go into a group and they ask you for your email address.
Yes.
I've received emails that's part 2 of 2 and there's no welcome, there's no nothing. And I'm just like, okay, who are you and why am I getting this?
Yeah, right.
So some kind of a welcome.
Yeah.
Here's what you should expect.
I think this is a perfect example of what we were talking about earlier in terms of go in and look at your sequences. And maybe when you set that up, that in that example, when they set that up, they were in a rush. They were setting up 50 other things and they just kind of threw it together and they haven't looked at it since. But now is the time, I would say pretty much every 6 to 12 months, you should be checking, making sure it's what you really want to be saying and that nothing's changed, that there's things that don't need to be tweaked and adjusted and improved and added to, especially over time.
Even change your copyright footer.
Right. Well, and over time, you start to realize what people care about. Like they've come to this download or this ebook or this lead magnet for a specific reason, and then they're going to ask you some follow-up questions. Hone in on that. So take your learned experience through that campaign or whatever it is and realize which part works and which part you can kind of abandon because, nobody cares about that part.
Totally.
Okay. It is time for the book review. We have a whole section on the website where we have a library of books that all of our guests have recommended. It's a great resource for all of the different episodes. You can go by topic. And so obviously you can go into the podcast section, drill down by email marketing, and you'll see once this episode is live, obviously you'll see the recommendation for today's episode. And so, MV, what's the book that you wanted to recommend for the library today?
Well, I had 3, so I'm not sure which one we're picking. 2 are on email marketing, and then 1 is on more general marketing. I think the one that I would recommend as more general is Simple Marketing for Smart People by Billy Broas. It really helped me decide on the biggest questions that it helped me answer is, what is it that my people need to know in order to want to work with me?
Yeah.
And it helped me create this almost a ladder of belief.
Yeah.
In the sense. And it was just a really good chance for me to sit down and clarify my thoughts and my beliefs.
Yeah.
Where I was doing it more piecemeal before.
Sure.
The other 2 books I recommend are specifically about email. So I don't know if you're going to put them.
Yeah, absolutely.
I am a book nerd, so.
Yeah, I am too. Which is why I have this whole section. So tell me about there's the one email marketing book that we were talking about, let's talk about that.
Which one? You have them in front of you. So.
Email marketing that doesn't suck.
Right. So this was written by a former lawyer. I think he is kind of a lawyer still. So he actually has a legal startup that I am a customer for.
Nice.
And I was one of the early readers. So I don't agree with him on all of his takes.
Okay.
But I will just say that they absolutely made me think. and say,
perfect.
This is what I want for this is what I believe about my marketing. This is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm willing to do. And that was a really good thing in a more general way, because it actually helped me decide how I'm going to go about being visible and getting people on my email list, as well as what I want to be sending.
Yeah, I think that's important, because I think, we were talking in the beginning before we started recording that for some reason I think people overlook and undervalue how important your email list is. And so just getting your head around how you're going to get, how you're going to create a list, how you're going to try to get more people onto that list, and what you're going to provide in order for people to do that. Because I know for myself, I don't just hand out my email unless I am sure that it's going to, be something I want. I also have a whole separate kind of fake email that I use for ones where I'm like, I'm not so sure.
Common,
so if you've if I've used that email on some list, you're automatically, there's something not quite either trustworthy or something about your offer that I'm like, I'm not giving you my good email, my real one. I'm giving you this other one that is automatically, anything that goes into that email, it's questionable. And I'm assuming there's a certain amount of spam there. And so if you're thinking that you're getting those kinds of emails, there's something wrong, either with your message or your email or your hook or whatever it is that you're offering. So that's something that needs to be reconsidered. But the book, Email Marketing That Doesn't Suck, the author is Bobby Klink. We'll link to that on the show page as well. So MB, what's the new section that we started adding in the last few episodes is this action items. So what's the first thing after listening to this episode that you think people should think about doing in terms of their email marketing, their email campaigns, maybe their technical details or whatever it is? What's the first thing that they should actually do?
Well, as we talked about, if you already have some kind of email marketing, go and sign up and look at it with fresh eyes. If you don't have email marketing, but you think you want to start gathering up your contacts list, like exporting, your different contacts list and putting them together. And then, don't just add them to your list, please. Yeah. But it's totally okay to send them 1 or 2 emails saying, hey, I'm going to be emailing about this. Please sign up here. And then you get that affirmative opt-in, and you get that first batch of people who actually want to hear from you, because it's really hard to be, sending into the wilderness and never hearing anything. So I think that's a good start.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I also liked the other tip about that we've said a couple times now about just checking your stuff and making sure that it, like if you wrote it a few years ago and you've got these systems in place, that's great. And there's nothing wrong with having those automations, but let's make sure that they're saying what you want them to say and doing what you want them to do, and that you take a look at how they've been working and what questions people are asking, and maybe you need to fine tune it to better serve those questions. I do that all the time, and I go back in, especially for kind of my initial inquiry form where people continue to ask or say the same thing, and I realize, okay, that there's a hiccup there that I need to kind of patch over and figure out why this question keeps coming up. And so let's go in and figure this out and resolve it. And then it just keeps making my forms and my processes stronger instead of having them sort of rust and go away and become less effective and all of that good stuff. So really good tips and action items for people to think about. MB Braverman is the founder of Inbox Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. This was an awesome episode.
Thank you so much for having me, and I totally agree.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Counsel Cast podcast. Be sure to visit our website at counsel-cast.com for the resources mentioned on the episode and to give us your feedback. If you enjoyed this episode, I would appreciate if you could rate and review the podcast on Apple and subscribe to your favorite podcast platform. See you on the next one.